That's your money saying it's time for a McDonald's run. Because with new McValue at McDonald's, you get more than you expect. Like buy a 6-piece McNuggets and add a McChicken for just $1. Your money says let's go. Get more than you expect with new McValue. Prices and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about when a parent committed suicide. And this is unfortunately something that a lot of people come in having that in their history. And I will talk about the ramifications of that, as well as how to think about it if you are or have been actively suicidal and you are a parent. And I will do that right after I tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was Jealousy is Not Always Bad. And if you are a preoccupied attachment person struggling with an avoidant spouse who is never jealous and never gives a shit about anything, then this is the episode for you. Okay, so what does it mean when a parent commits suicide to a child? Well, it means that they didn't stick around for you. And it doesn't, of course, that doesn't really mean that. It means that they were suffering so much that they couldn't deal with anything. But the child self interprets that as that the parent did not care enough to stay with you. And they did not value you enough, and they did not get enough joy out of your relationship to stay alive. And this is a huge, huge, impactful lens-changing variable, as you can imagine. And some people listening to this happened to their spouse, so this can give you new insight into how your spouse feels. Some people, it happened to them. Some people, it happened in their family. And I'll talk about almost like the equivalent. There's no real equivalent of this, but other things that are taken similarly by a child in a bit. But so suicide runs in families, and the reason for that is because, think about it, everything else does, right? Everything else runs in families. If your father was an entrepreneur, then you're likelier to be an entrepreneur. That's something that your dad did. He was your role model. If your mom was a teacher, you're more likely to be a teacher. I mean, any of these things. Obviously, genetically, depression runs in families. Being so depressed that you would consider or execute on a suicide is also genetic. It's nature, but it's also nurture, because if it was an option that was done by a parent, well, then it's gonna feel more like an option to you. You have a higher risk of feeling suicidal when depressed. You already have a higher risk of being depressed, right? Because that, as I just said, it's nature and nurture, but then that is something that someone in your family did. In order to cope with depression, you can't get rid of that almost as an option in your mind. Some people do. Some people really are, they say to themselves, I would never, ever do that. It's not even in the option. No matter how depressed I am, I would never do that to my kid because it happened to me. And some people, and this is, by the way, it doesn't mean that you, of course, like I just said, that your parents didn't love you. I just read a memoir of a woman whose husband committed suicide, and I'll link that in the episode description. But this guy loved his kid so much. He was like an MIT professor. This is why this topic is on my mind. In addition to that, it's happened to many of my clients over the years. The guy was totally devoted to his kids, but he was so depressed he couldn't see outside himself. And then, he jumped off a bridge, right? And so that, unfortunately, as I was reading it, it makes it more likely, to know that the children know that that is an option of how people react when they're depressed. It unfortunately makes it more likely that if they were ever depressed, they consider it an option. I hope they don't, but that just is literally the truth. So if you had a parent that struggled with depression and suicidality, the important thing to realize is it is totally normal that would come into your mind when you are depressed. So you are at risk. You are at risk more than other people who don't have that as an option that was done in their literal family, right? And by the way, this doesn't only have to be about a parent. This could be about anybody in your family. There's a lot of people who say an uncle, committed suicide, etc., or whoever, a grandparent. And it's such a big part of the family lore. It's not something that you have in the back of your mind, and then you get rid of it. It's something that's kind of always ambiently there in your family history. And so some people can say that was the worst thing ever and I would never do that. And some people they may say that, but then when they get more depressed, it comes out more as an option for them than it would for other people. So the first thing to think about is it's almost like if that happened, you should be in therapy. Like, I mean, you know that from listening to this podcast, I'm like one of the only therapists that doesn't think everybody should be in therapy. Like, I literally have podcasts like, should everybody be in therapy? And like, the answer is no. Like, it isn't like a fake answer where that I say everybody should be. No, I do not think everybody should be in therapy. However, in the situation where you had a parent that committed suicide and you're depressed, you should be in therapy. Like that one, I really believe you should almost be in therapy, on and off, probably forever, and just have somebody that you could reach out to whenever the depression gets worse, because this is hugely impactful. This is taken by a child as the ultimate abandonment. A child perceives this as a choice. The choice that, and in this memoir, I can't remember the name of, the girl, like when she was told that her father died and killed himself, she was so little, and the first thing she said is, I'm not even in double digits yet. Like it's when you're a child, and this is something that your parent does, you don't expect your parent to die. You don't even expect them to die at all, because like you're so young, and then you're just not even thinking about that, like as a child at all. And then when it happens, and then it's not even something that happened to them, but you consider it to be a choice, then it can feel like the ultimate rejection. And it underlies what is almost definitely, I'm just gonna say definitely 99% of the time, if that's in your past, you are gonna be insecurely attached. And your other surviving parent can do the best job in the whole entire world of parenting. And that can be a huge buffer, but this thing does not go away. And you are going to tend to be anxious about losing yourself and relying too much on a relationship, which is avoidant, or if you're preoccupied, anxious about somebody leaving you, no shit, obviously why, or if you're fearful avoidant, you will basically be angry at even the idea that you could be close to somebody, because it's very chaotic in your mind, the fearful avoidant. You could listen to my whole podcast on fearful avoidant, the one you get when your childhood is traumatic. Like that's almost that you got a big likelihood of being fearful avoidant attachment if you have a parent who committed suicide because of this abandonment. And you have a higher chance also of borderline personality, because borderline personality is a huge fear of abandonment and not trusting relationships. Well, how are you going to trust a relationship if a parent opted out of the relationship? Now, there are other things, and they didn't. Again, I don't know how many different ways I could say this. When you are suicidal, I've worked with, unfortunately, a lot of suicidal people over the years. Not unfortunately that I work with them, but unfortunate that they feel it. And when you are that depressed, you truly feel that the children would be better off without you. In fact, it's ironic. You feel you would be a better parent if you left them. You feel that you are burdening them. You're a bad parent. You're depressed. You're not like all these other happy parents. You cannot deal with life. You are fucking up left and right. You are snapping at the kids. You're yelling at the kids. You're laying in your bed. You have a drinking problem. Whatever it is, you deeply feel that the children would be better off without you. And some people listening to this who are very depressed have felt that. And I am here to tell you from years and years and years of experience working with people, many of whom are adult children of a parent's abandonment, either in this way or any other way, such as, for example, untreated alcohol abuse or drug abuse. This is also taken by children to almost feel the same way. I'm not going to say not as bad. It's not like we could put a hierarchy, but there is always the possibility that the parent will get out of the addiction, will somehow treat the addiction. It's extremely difficult, or like they will overcome it and then they'll come out the other side, and then you'll have a different version of the parent. Of course, when they're dead, there is no other future parent that you can have in your mind as a possibility. So, but either way, a parent devolving into active drug use or alcohol use that can be also taken very similarly as a choice. Like you're choosing to drink instead of be with me. You're choosing to do drugs instead of be with me. This is not how the person feels. The person who is in the throes of the addiction or the suicidal despair, they feel completely overwhelmed. They feel that the child would be better off without them. They feel that they cannot get out of the hole that they're in. They feel shame constantly. And they believe, I used to work with kids at a group home, which I mentioned periodically, and some of those parents gave up parental rights when they had drug use because you just can't take care of a kid, and in your mind, you feel like they'd be better off. And many times they would be better off because you're not able to take care of them. So they'd be better off to be with somebody else instead of with you as a drug user because you're not taking care of them. There's neglect. There was terrible neglect that I saw, people taken out of terrible situations. And anyway, they were better off in the group home because there's safety. They had, a warm place and people were nice to them and there's rules and nice structure, etc. But point being that if you are a child who has especially adult child, I hope no children are listening ever to anything I ever say. Like this is not the podcast to listen to with your kids. But point being that if you are somebody who had a parent who was so depressed and then they committed suicide, you have to understand that at that point, they all uniformly think, because this is what people think when they recover from suicidal levels of depression, that they were doing the right thing for you. That was the right choice, that they were a burden and so bad as a parent that it would be a gift to you for them to leave. And if you've ever been suicidal yourself listening to this, then you recognize that. The idea is that you feel your brain is lying to you. It's a cognitive distortion related to depression. So depression, you have negative thoughts about, it's called the depressive cognitive triad. You have negative thoughts about self, world, future. And so obviously, you think you yourself are worthless. Nothing's ever going to change. You're bad for everybody, and this will be how you feel forever. And if you feel like that, if that were actually true, it would still not be right to kill yourself, but you could see the point, right? It's never true, though. Like, that is literally never true. That is a depressive thought, and that is when your brain is lying to you, because your brain, at some point, we're going to figure out what neurotransmitters or what's going on. We have no real full idea of how depression works in the brain. People say serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, all this stuff, but, a lot of studies contradict each other. Anyway, at some point, possibly not in our lifetime, people are going to really know what's going on, and then they're going to be able to treat it, but it's not yet. And we can treat it with trial and error, with depression, medications, with therapy, etc. But, at some point I feel like it'll be like, how you give insulin, to a diabetic, then they're just better, like right away. But we are not there. So while this person is in the throes of the suicidal despair, they feel they'd be being a better parent to leave the earth entirely. And that is kind of really perspective shifting to a lot of people who had a parent who did kill themselves, because they think kind of that the parent either wasn't thinking about them at all or left them. Like they feel like they were not enough to keep the parent around. Like that the parent somehow was like, you know what? I wouldn't kill myself if I really was into my kid, but since I'm not, then I can. And like nothing could be further from the truth. And that in and of itself could be a huge realization. And if this is your partner who struggles with this, who had this in their family history, then you can understand why this person would always feel inferior, inadequate, weird. There's a lot of people who lose parents, but there's such a smaller subset of people who lose a parent to suicide. Support groups of people who lose a parent to suicide, specifically Reddit forums, anything, all of this can be useful because you feel like such a weird person. If this happens, it's so anomalous. Of course, unfortunately, it's not as anomalous as I would like for there to be 0 instances, but this does happen and it makes you feel so weird and like a misfit, which is how adult children of dysfunctional families feel anyway. It amplifies that by 1,000,000. And so it is good to talk to not only a therapist, but it's also good to talk to, support groups and other people who have experienced the same thing. The thing is, what people don't realize when they are very, very depressed is that any parent is better than a parent who isn't there, who is dead, and who has no possibility for change. So a lot of people with depression, it can be really a very big mind shift to do something like acceptance and commitment therapy, or you don't even need a fancy name for any of this, to be working with a therapist who can say, like, straight up, honestly, like, yeah, like, you're depressed. You're probably always going to be depressed to some extent or another. It's going to wax and wane if it's been chronic for this long. And what your job is to basically tolerate being depressed while remaining alive for a parent. And maybe that's all that you could do in a day, is that you're alive that day, even though you're in crushing pain with depression. And of course, you could be working on it a million different ways, right? But sometimes people have treatment-resistant depression. Those are the people, and bipolar depression, treatment-resistant depression, and bipolar depression, specifically the mix of those is when people are more frequent, have higher suicide rates. And the idea can be almost a little bit liberating when you kind of just commit to being alive. Like, that's what you got to do as a parent. Like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't even really have to be a good parent many days. You got to keep them alive and keep yourself alive. Now, if you can't keep them alive, then you would need to, the children, then you would need to get somebody in to help with that, whether that's the other parent or whether that would be paid help or anything. I'm talking about situations where people feel like they cannot get up, they're too depressed to function. But basically, your job as a parent is like, no matter how depressed you are, no matter how bad you feel, do you keep yourself alive? Because otherwise, you're giving the child, as I talked about in the earlier part of the podcast, you're giving your child a template, a script that this is a possibility. And remember, they're going to be probably depressed, like you, genetic, just like your parents were probably depressed, And so they have a higher likelihood of being depressed than the average because you're depressed. And that just is what it is. If you're a redhead, then your child is more likely to be a redhead. That's the way genes work, So if they're depressed, no matter how painful, you can do one really, really good thing in your life, which is that you don't give them that as an option. That's like the main goal. Like, the main goal isn't to get them into an Ivy League school or be the one who hosts all the play dates or whatever. Your goal is that they should not think there is a very obvious option if you're depressed. It's the one that my mom/dad did, which is commit suicide. Like that one you do not want them to have. They know that exists in the world, but that it would not be a family thing. And sometimes this can be a good guidepost for severely depressed clients who are parents. To commit to what I'm not going to do is give them that as an option that they feel is like in the sample set of ways that they specifically could deal with this one day, making that an even bigger likelihood than they know that in the ambient environment, but knowing that it happened in your family by somebody with the same genetics as you, that makes it a huge risk. So even just committing with your therapist to literally not killing yourself. People contract for safety all the time when they're feeling suicidal. And that as mandated reporters, I don't know what you guys know listening, but I don't know if you've ever been a therapy client before, but if you are, in the beginning, in informed consent, we say, everything you tell me is confidential, except in cases of child abuse, elder abuse, homicidal or suicidal ideation. That would have to be reported. Everything else is confidential. And you can see by how fast I say it that I've been saying this, most days, every day that I see a new client, which isn't most days anymore as intakes. But anyway, I've said it thousands of times. And the point is that when somebody says I am suicidal, then there's like kind of this whole process. You have to be like, well, do you have a plan? Do you have an active way you're going to do it? Are you just saying that you're suicidal because you feel passively suicidal, or are you going to actually go home and do this? And based on what they say, then you would have to actually intervene. You would have to call the police, or you would have to get them committed into an inpatient unit, etc. But if somebody's telling you, by the way, then they, on some level, they want to do that they need that. And there's no shame in being in an inpatient unit if it's going to prevent you from being suicidal. There's no shame in doing almost anything if it's going to prevent you from being suicidal, because remember, if you are so depressed that you're suicidal, then your main job is just not killing yourself, not giving your children that as an option that they know from their own parent. So some people, as depressing as the whole topic is, can find that to be kind of freeing in a way. Like, I don't have to, like, I got one job. I'm going to stay on brand. My one job is not to hurt myself because I have kids and I can't. And I've read many memoirs. You know, I love to read, and I'm going to get you the name of that first book in the description. But anywho, I've read multiple memoirs of mothers who have had depression, and many of them have said something like that. Like, I just can't kill myself anymore. So that's just not a thing I can do. So obviously I can't be in charge of whether or not I'm depressed, but I could definitely think that that's off the table. And in fact, having a baby is something that really helps a lot of women with borderline personality disorder. And I'm not saying go out and get pregnant. If you got borderline personality disorder, that's going to be a panacea. But in real life, symptoms of borderline personality attenuate with age, especially the more violent, volatile, externalizing symptoms, you know. And in some part, in large part, perhaps that's due to motherhood. You just can't do, you know, this stuff. Even if you feel like you're in so much pain, there feels like there's a natural check on your behavior. You know, like no matter how upset you are, there's just certain things that everybody has different standards for their own behavior, but there's just certain things you won't do. And so for somebody with depression, one of those could be, I will not kill myself, you know, straight up. And to commit to that with a therapist can be really transformative for people who deeply struggle. And so, of course, if you ever need a therapist, you can reach out to me. There's or my people, but there are loads of therapists. I mean, working with depression is our bread and butter. So wherever you live, whatever, you know, wherever you are, however you need to work with somebody, there are going to be plenty of people that you could reach out to who work with depression, and you should. And if you're somebody whose parent did commit suicide and you never got into therapy because you said you're okay, well, I would just say, honestly, I don't know, go in and talk about it. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. It really is a very huge deal, and it changes your entire perspective. And much like how I used to work at the VA, a lot of combat veterans feel like they can't talk to civilians about their combat experience because it's just like a different planet. The person would never understand, they think. That's the same as having a parent kill themselves. You may feel like literally nobody else would understand that, even your spouse, and so you don't even really talk about it. You don't even really think about it because you can't even really talk about it. But it may be impacting you in huge ways that you never realize, such as a tendency to dissociate, a tendency to substance abuse, a tendency toward depression, a tendency toward avoidant or fearful avoidant or preoccupied attachment, etc. All right, I hope you guys got something out of this one. More of a serious topic. Not like, of course, everything is a serious topic when people struggle, but this one has been on my mind because of that book, as well as the multiple people, honestly, that I talk to who have like massive trauma in their history, and they diminish it, and they really don't give themselves that self-compassion and grace to say, my God, this really terrible thing happened to me. Here's how I may have interpreted it, and here's how it may be impacting me. As well as many people listen to me with depression, some of which is very severe. And I hope, and my hope is that it would resonate with at least one person who would say, well, that's a different way to look at it. Instead of having to be a great parent along with being depressed, maybe I just have to stay alive. Maybe that, and then everything else maybe is bonus. All right, talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.